Hello and welcome to another episode of the Daily Remedy Podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that is very dear to many people's hearts: denials. And no, I'm not talking about Valentine's Day. I'm talking about health insurance denials. Recently, we've obtained copies from 2023 denial rates among many insurance companies across the country. Probably the most alarming statistic that we found was that in 2023, one out of every five claims made through a health insurance offered through the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, were denied. Think about that for a second. Publicly available insurances offered through the Affordable Care Act had a denial rate of 20%. That's incredible. For context, United Healthcare, probably the worst offender of all, has a 33% denial rate. So the question then becomes, why are all these insurance companies engaging in such rampant denial? And what we wanted to do was really provide a context so that you, the consumer, the patient, can really understand what's going on with these health insurance plans. So let's look at the revenue cycle management consulting firm Xtelligent that provided a more in-depth analysis on the denial rates. And let me just throw out some numbers here for you guys so you really get a sense of how bad this problem of denials really is. So according to the analysis done nationwide, AvMed, AVMED, and United Healthcare tied for the highest denial rates, with denial rates around one-third of all in-network claims for insurance plans. So some other insurance companies like Sendero Health Plan, Molina Healthcare, and Community First Health Plans were around the 25%. Again, Sendero Health Plans, Molina Healthcare, and Community First Health Plans 28, 26, and 26% respectively. Other worst offenders, Anthem, the infamous Anthem based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, was at 23%, Medica at 23%, and Aetna at 22%. Now, why is the denial rate so high? Well, what's interesting is that they take into account a lot of factors, but socioeconomic status is the biggest factor. And you would think, why would that come into play? But the data is undeniable. Patients under 30,000 household income have a higher denial rate than those at higher household incomes. It seems a bit counterintuitive, but when you look at the numbers, it's irrefutable. Those among lower socioeconomic statuses have a higher rate of denials when it comes to insurance companies. Now, you could make the claim that perhaps they have access to less quality of care, that the documentation, so on and so forth. But if you look at it from a grand scale, the numbers really point to a financial bias. And we derived that because we started cross-referencing these denial rates as a function of the states. And what we found is that there is a state-based predilection for how all of this takes place. So South Dakota has the lowest denial rate, and states in the general Great Plains tend to have a lower denial rate, which means that populations that tend to be more homogeneous, more small, sparsed out, tend to have a lower denial rate than populations that are more diverse and more dense. When you cross correlate all of that, you really start to see that it's less about any sort of individual clinical aberration and more about the trends writ large, which is quite concerning because when you look at how these denial rates affect the quality of care, what you're seeing is that there is almost a business model predicated on denials, meaning the denials are not a bug in the feature of these health insurance companies. Rather, they are a feature of healthcare insurance as we understand it. Let's kind of look at this. And again, we're going back to the Xtelligent analysis. Among private insurance plans, 4% of the claims that were denied were eventually paid out, which means that half the time physicians and patients had to fight the private payer in order to eventually get the payout itself. It's a flip of a coin, if you think about it in that sense. If you run a business and you tell the customers that I'm only going to pay you half the time, in most of the businesses, you will be out of business. But in health insurance companies, it seems to be a model that they've thrived on. And when you start to look at the numbers overall, you really start to get a sense of how impactful this really is. So we can say United Healthcare denies one out of every three claims. Sure, that seems like a lot, but what is the actual scale of that? So if we want to look at some of the worst offenders based on the insurance plan and based on the state, you really start to get the sense of the magnitude of these denials. So let me give you a few examples. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama. Again, a specific plan in a specific state, cannot generalize for all the blues across the country, but this one particular plan in 2023 denied 4,533,017 claims. 4.5 million claims were denied by this insurance company in one state. United Health Group denied 4.6 million. Healthcare Service Corporation denied 7.3 million. Molina in 23 denied 1.4 million. The numbers and the sources are all available in the link below here. But what this really demonstrates is that all this outrage about health insurance companies denying care and how it's unethical and whatnot, I think this goes beyond the issue of ethics. I think it goes into the actual business model that these companies are allowed to engage in. It really lends into this notion of fraud. So if I were a flower shop owner and I were to consistently sell decaying flower or spoiled flower or whatnot, I cannot advertise myself as a flower shop because it would be perceived as consumer deception. If I owned, let's say, a comic book store and the only comics that I sold were ones that I made up, scratching on paper and selling it, no Marvel, no DC, nothing, I cannot state that I'm selling comic books. These are literal drawings that I'm putting together and then passing off. It's fraud. So when health insurance companies say that they're providing a health service, yet private plans are denying 54%, only to give in after the provider or the patient fights that denial, or if insurance companies are denying one third, one fifth of all plans, particularly among plans that are available on the Affordable Care Act, the system that was designed to ensure that people get insurance. If you're denying one out of every five claim, are you really providing a health service? That's a question that we need to answer. It becomes a matter of civil protection, consumer protection, and we as patients, as consumers of a product, really need to look at this from a legal standpoint. Our insurance companies, our health insurance companies, by engaging in this routine practice of denial, committing fraud. And can we prove that they're committing fraud by having this concept of denial be so systemic in their business model that it is not a bug, it's a feature? And if that is the case, then we need to fundamentally re examine the health insurance company, the health insurance industry, and all the companies within it. Because this is not a sustainable model and this is not good business practice. And any other industry that would engage in such deception, such overt fraud, would be shut down. And so, you, the consumer, I want to ask you this question as I conclude. Do you feel that the denials you're experiencing, whether as a provider, whether as a patient, is justified, aberrant, meaning just appearing randomly, where you're just expecting out of the blue a denial? And how much of this is anticipated? Meaning, if you were to submit a claim, do you know in the back of your mind that you're likely to get a denial? Because if that is the case, then you essentially are acknowledging that the service or the good that you're consuming is likely not going to be met with the appropriate financial remuneration. That's fraud. So share in the comment section below experiences that you've had. What I would like to do is gather together as much anecdotal evidence so that together we can substantiate these numbers, because these the data points and the percentages that we're seeing are remarkable. And it's not just a matter of moralizing an ethical quandary on whether a care service should be provided or not provided. These numbers and the percentages and the magnitude, when looked at in absolute terms, reveals fraud. And we have to do something about it. So tell us what you want to do, tell us your experiences, and let's figure out a way to move forward.